And we are back with Ignite 2021 Cyber. Let's meet our panelists today for our discussion on digital transformation. Our first panelist is the Global Client Director, Transformation Consulting at Dentsu International, where he is advising multinational clients in the field of data-driven marketing transformation. He joined Dentsu International in 2017 following the acquisition of his marketing consultancy business. Please welcome Mr. Nick Broomfield.
Hi.
Our next panelist heads up 500 Startups Global Innovation Team for Asia Pacific, with teams in Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, India, and Cambodia. In her role, she works with various ecosystem stakeholders, which include governments, corporations, foundations, startups, to accelerate their innovation journey. Please all welcome Ms. E. Ling Lim. Our last panelist is the Managing Director and CEO of FDev, the venture and innovation arm of the Philinvest Group of Companies and board advisor of several tech startups. He was previously the founding CEO at TrueMoney PH and CEO COO at GCash. Welcome to Ignite, Mr. Xavier Marzan. And lastly, joining us today as a moderator is a good friend. He is the Managing Director of the Philippine office of Endeavor, a New York-based nonprofit focused on helping high-impact entrepreneurs scale up their businesses. Prior to Endeavor, he founded Hatched, a tech incubator in the Philippines that has built and invested in a portfolio of consumer tech companies, which include Rappler, Pawn Hero, Purple Click, Grocery, and Ayana. He is a past president of the Philippine chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization, where he launched the Global Student Entrepreneur Awards across Asia. Please all welcome my good friend, Mr. Manny Ayala.
Thank you very much for that, RJ, and welcome to our panel guests today. Today we're going to tackle digital transformation in the time of COVID. So before we get going, I just want to make the observation that, at least from where I sit, as just a regular guy who does things in life, well, the world certainly has changed. I think it's fair to say that COVID-19 has pushed companies over the technology tipping point, and you could say transform business and transform lives forever. And as proof of that, I will just mention three things that I did in the last week that I didn't used to do 2 years ago. So in the last week, what did I do? I went to a little Japanese grocery in Makati and I used GCash to pay because they wouldn't accept a credit card. Fortunately, I actually knew how to use GCash. The other day, I had a 2-day offsite with my team to do our annual planning, and both of those were done entirely via Zoom. And the other day, I ordered a cheeseburger from Shake Shack via Grab. So two things that 2 years ago, I never used to do. KPMG says that 67% of all companies have accelerated their digital transformation strategy, and 63% of them have increased their digital transformation budget. And then finally, McKinsey says in the first year of COVID alone, companies have done anywhere from 3 to 7 years worth of transformation. So today we're going to get right into it. We're going to see what's under the hood, what's driving all of this. And we're very fortunate to have three people who are in the thick of all of this digital transformation, right? So I guess the first question I'm going to ask our panelists is, can you share some great examples of how companies have been able to make that digital transformation? And so to get us started, why don't I, Nick, I'm going to pick on you because you've been doing this for a long time, right? And now you're the Global Director of Transformation Consulting at Dentsu. So I'd like to get your opinion on Of the clients that you've helped to try to get into a more sort of digitized life, what have been some terrific examples of that?
Thanks, Manny. I think you're right in terms of what you've said about the acceleration in the past year to 18 months of the transformation agenda in clients, thanks to or because of COVID. And we're seeing a lot of clients now starting to really focus their efforts around resourcing up in the field of transformation and putting in place resources and focused budget behind driving far more change at a far greater speed. So we're working with a number of clients. IKEA, the global furniture retailer, is one example of a client that's putting in place a lot more resourcing at the central level to help their market teams who are trying to overcome some of the challenges around the increase in the use of technology by consumers, the need to drive more of online experiences than just the retail environment. So they're a client that we're working with across Europe, Asia Pacific, to really focus on how they're putting in place a far greater focus from the centre down into the local markets to overcome the challenges. We're also working with Coca-Cola globally, also across Asia Pacific, and they're another client that are putting in place a lot more focus, innovative focus around how they're trying to drive transformation into their markets.
Would I see that as a customer? I mean, how would that kind of show up in sort of my life as a IKEA, which, by the way, I love IKEA, as an IKEA customer or a Coca-Cola drinker? Would that actually touch the customer experience in addition to sort of the things they do internally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing a lot more examples of companies trying to use data now to understand their consumers and their customers in a far deeper and more emotional way. So a lot of the connections that we're seeing now are being more personal, more relevant. The customer experience is becoming more connected. So for Coca-Cola, it ranges from accessing a brand website or a loyalty program right through to the actual freestyle vending machines that you see, where they're actually looking to collect consumer data on customers so that they can understand them better and provide a far more relevant experience. And the data is being used to try to connect that experience across the different channels so that ultimately the content and the experience therefore is more relevant.
Cool, awesome. I'll move on to you, Yiling. Since you run a program, well, 500 Startups runs a bunch of corporate innovation programs, right? So you work with companies precisely to help them sort of make that jump into a more digital life. In the work that you've been doing, and I know you do this across the world, what are some of the standouts, right? When you think of companies you've helped, who are your, let's say, A+ students? And tell me what exactly it is that they've done to make them so stellar.
Yeah, thanks so much, Manny. I think when we look at companies that's really stood out in terms of innovation, right, and transformation itself, at 500, we would use a methodology or a framework called the Open 4 to really, I guess, opine and assess as to how innovative these companies are. And the Open 4 framework actually relies on the 4 elements are essentially, strategic priorities, the vision, the strategy, their value proposition to the larger ecosystem, their involvement with the startup ecosystem as a whole and the role that they play in there, and then organizational readiness as well. So buy-in both from top down as well as bottom up. So if we were look at it from these 4 perspectives, I think there are a few standout companies, not necessarily partners of ours, but standout companies would include people like your DBS and Singtel in Singapore, your Ping An Group in China. But I definitely do want to shout out to a few rising stars, right? We work with Visa in Singapore to run their accelerator program. And even having done innovation for so long, they are constantly still growing and being able to bring in more and more supporters from all the various business units and the markets within Visa itself, both top down as well as bottom up. And one of the startups from our latest program actually told us that they were a little bit skeptical going in as to whether or not this would be a program that's any different, but the support And the resources that Visa actually provided to them through the program itself really just wowed them. I mean, this is a late stage company, Series B, Series C, and they felt that was such a great experience. And to us, when we hear stories like that, it just feels as if corporates are learning how to work better with startup and how to innovate more in a more balanced format. And then similarly, we also work with, or see a lot of corporates in their own countries itself who are playing a role in terms of, number one, I want to say nation building, but really supporting their own local startups. So people like Petronas in Malaysia, right, are doing things like that. But also at the same time, while supporting the local startups, using the tools and finding use cases to innovate as well. We also work with a large telco company in South Korea who's also exploring both inside out and outside in kind of innovation. So I think a lot of things, I wouldn't say that, are they like A-star students? Definitely. But what really excites us is the amount of growth that's happening in terms of the mindset shift and everything in this space.
What did you call the framework that you use at 500 Startups? What's it called?
It's called the Open 4 framework.
Open 4, okay. A little bit later on, Nick, I'm going to ask you about Dentsu's schema, right? Because I think that's your sort of overarching framework. But before we get to that, let me now ask you, should I call you Xavier or Javier?
Yeah, Xavier. It's
Xavier.
Yeah.
Okay, so Xavier, so you're a little bit different because you're actually spearheading the efforts within a large, existing large company, right? I guess one question is, have you found it easy or difficult to try to do that on your own? And if so, what has been your experience trying to, try to connect with, smaller, nimbler companies to try to...
Right. Yeah, let me, so thanks for the question, Manny. Let me actually address that by maybe sharing what our perspective is on digitalizing one's business model. And to us, it actually involves three spheres, right? And those are three spheres that we're working on. So first sphere is actually innovating from the outside and disrupting ourselves by leveraging and running after new business models, right? And actually, this is what FDev, our venture building arm, is doing. So this month, we're actually launching our portfolio of 5 new startups, which we've launched over the course of the last maybe 15 months, right? On opportunities that are adjacent to the industry sectors where the Philinvest Group is operating in today, right? So we invest and incubate these new digital businesses to support, complement our core, while at the same time running after opportunities in new underserved sectors, right? The second sphere that we work on is accelerating our core operating companies' digital initiatives, right? Whether that's in banking or real estate or hotels, right? So what we've done is establish this internal accelerator. It's called PhilInvent IO, right? Where we actually help leadership teams and squads within the operating companies develop new digital products, and we work with them in new agile ways of working, right? So we wanted to get them ready for competing in an accelerated digital future. That's why we work on both actual product development as well as shifting people's culture, right? And actually, that leads me to the third sphere, which is people and mindset transformation, which actually underpins all these digital transformation initiatives, right? So I think you have to do leadership and people transformation in order to achieve more successful digital transformation in your organization, right? So all these three spheres are related. And I think that organizations have to work on this holistically, right? If they want to have a more effective digital transformation journey.
Okay, so perhaps building on that, Nick, maybe you can talk about your approach, right? Because what I'm hearing, right, is you actually can't just say, okay, I'm going to throw a bunch of code at this. It's actually a organization-wide transformation, right, which has some cultural elements, which has some technology elements. So Nick, perhaps you could just share the Dentsu schema framework.
Sure. So schema is our framework for transformation best practice. We look at 3 levels. We have the foundations, which cover areas such as direction and leadership, people and culture, as you've said, but also data and technology, which we'll come back to. We then look at some of the key enablers of transformation, which focus on areas such as measurement and evaluation, brand and proposition, customer experience, and then finally execution. So how do brands go about winning customers and then keeping and developing those customers? So it's 3 levels, from the sort of the corporate inside out to how a company actually delivers and executes their marketing activities. And I would very much echo what Xavier has just said around the focus, or the need to focus on people and culture. Transformation is fundamentally a people-focused strategy, a people-focused business. Clearly, it's enabled and powered and supported by tech and, of course, data, as I've said. However, fundamentally, this is about driving people change. So a lot of the work that we do is in helping our clients put together the right cultural change program. And as Xavier said too, they're focusing increasingly on how businesses can be more agile in their ways of working. But those focuses are needed before a company looks at investing in the right technology solutions. We ran some research with the World Federation of Advertisers recently using our schema framework. And we found that those businesses that were advanced in their transformation had 55% of them said that they had senior management buy-in to their program, versus only 4% of businesses that were claiming to be just starting out. And that's such a significant gap in those that are succeeding, having leadership team support and sponsorship, versus those that do not have that. So for us, the focus is always set a vision, align the leadership behind that vision, communicate the vision and the direction, and then make sure that the business is behind that. Without that foundation, transformation programs often struggle.
While we're on the subject of struggle, Clayton Christensen, who is one of these innovation gurus from Harvard Business School, the guy who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, he said it was very difficult for companies to innovate because it's kind of like changing your tires while you're going 120 miles an hour, right? I mean, if you're making money doing one thing, doing something else necessarily is going to compete with your success in some sense. So I guess I want to get a sense from you, in particular, Yiling and Nick, right? When you're talking to these big guys, then we'll shift to you, Xavier, right? But when you're talking to these big successful companies, you say, okay, you know, we got to do this, 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 and this. I mean, typically, what's the response? How difficult is it to get them to actually move?
I think the response tends to be, where do we start? Because it can be overwhelming. There can be so much change across people, platforms, processes. It can be overwhelming. So our starting point is almost always to start to help them create a prioritized roadmap for change. And that roadmap has to identify some quick wins, because again, it can be overwhelming in that the change can seem huge and long term. So it's super important that the roadmap identifies some quick wins, some activities, some proof of concepts that can be proven in the first weeks or months of a program of change. I think having that plan in place and that plan bought into in the corporate center, obviously, but also in the markets where the change is going to be happening, is so important. So for us, we would always look to put in place that prioritized roadmap, a clear plan of actions, clear projects to be delivered, and owners of those projects identified and bought in. That would always help the program seem that little bit less overwhelming and manageable, and hopefully drive some tangible outcomes quickly. Is
that a similar experience for you, Yiling?
So when we look at transformation, right, or innovation itself, I mean, the often quoted model is really your three horizons, right? Core, adjacent, and transformational. And I would kind of compartmentalize the people that we speak with maybe two key categories, right? The ones who are taking action right now are generally the ones who are looking for I would say actively looking for solutions, but in the adjacent space. And these are corporates who are generally in the mobility, real estate, logistics, energy kind of space because they already see their industry being disrupted. They know that energy is depleting. They need to find next sources of revenue, next source of renewable energy. And so there is a sense of urgency there that's a little bit pushed by I need to innovate. But what also really excites me is the other group of corporates who are cash cows right now, right? Business is going well, they're doing really well. If they did not innovate, would their business suffer? Not immediately. They probably wouldn't see that. But these are the corporates who are currently looking for transformational innovation. So I see that with the telcos, with the financial institutions, and the insurers, where again, what's really exciting is that when they look at transformational solutions, they are looking at ways to tap onto and to serve their customers even more. Right? What do my SME clients need? What do my ultimate retailers need? What do my subscribers need? If I'm seeing the next generation being my subscribers, what are they acting like, right? Are they going to be raising families? Are they going to be raising pets? What kind of solutions do I need to provide to them? And that's what really excites me. I know I use that word a lot, but when I talk about it, it really does because I do see a lot of corporates getting more and more customer centric, really looking at what their ultimate customers want or the customers of their customers, what do they want, and then taking action to do that. Of course, there are always going to be that other group of corporates who are currently potentially even in crisis mode. They are looking then for very, very core solutions because they need to digitalize really quickly. And I think for all three groups itself, the speed to action, the buy-in that they get internally, and the budget and resources commitment that they have kind of all varies, but we are seeing it pick up.
Cool. Well, you know what? I'm going to ask you, Xavier, right? First of all, congrats, right, on spearheading this activity within Philinvest. I think it's great that you have FDev and philinvent.io. So kudos to you. But I got to ask you, what was the journey like, and how did you get, the owners to go and say, you know what, we got to start spending more time and money on this, even if the house isn't on fire yet?
Right, right. It's really important to get top level support for all of this, right? So actually, Manny, to be honest, I've actually kept a running list of about 30 or so pitfalls and barriers to digital transformation, which I tell organizations to watch out for, right? And this spans everything from trying to do everything under the sun or running after those bright and shiny opportunities to again lack of support from the CEO or the board, right? To not putting enough KPIs and incentives to move quickly on transformational initiatives. And one of my favorite barriers is actually organizations jumping into digital transformation without a clear strategy on how to compete in a digital age, right? So all these challenges run the gamut, and I think each organization would have to contend with their own sets of challenges, right? So I don't think there is this magic formula that I apply even to our own, group of about 60 to 70 different operating companies, because each company is in their own like life cycle within their industry in terms of digital transformation. The people are, have different maturity levels when it comes to digital concepts, right? In some cases, people would just simply equate digital to a list of IT automation projects, right? But in some cases, right, they know all these things about AI and fintech and how to embed that in their own processes and experiences, right? But all of these digital initiatives can't be done without top level support. And I'm actually happy that our principals actually talk the talk and walk the walk. You can see them every day talking about things like, we should be doing daily or weekly stand-ups, right? That we need to form agile squads just to focus on this particular effort, right? And it became that way because we did a lot of pilots and POCs at the beginning where we proved out this way of working, this new approach to delivering things, right? So at this time, it's still a journey, admittedly, and we still try to hurdle a lot of different issues. But again, it's improving day to day, right, and iterating on what you know.
Agreed.
I have a few more questions, but how much time do we have left, guys? We have like 3 or
Half an hour.
we can wrap up. Okay. Well, I guess to close, right, I'm going to ask you a question, right, which is, we've gone through, as I said, 3 to 7 years worth of transformation in, 1 to 2 years. The question is, are all these changes here to stay, right? So going back to my own personal experience, I'll tell you what will stick and what won't, right? So, I will continue to do Zoom, right? But I'm going to, over time, complement that with more and more face-to-face meetings. In fact, probably think about hybrid meetings where some are on Zoom and some are face-to-face. Gcash, well, I'm definitely going to use it more and more. Now that I have it, I know how to use it. It's dead easy to use. But I must say that I do like the idea of going to Shake Shack and eating the burger in the store, right? So I'm going to ask each of you to kind of make your fearless forecasts. That once we get back to normal, what's the level of transformation that we're going to see? Is it going to slow down? Are things going to revert back to the mean? So why don't we start with you, Nick, then we'll do Eling and then Xavier.
Sure thing, Manny. I think we've gone through a period of unprecedented change, and I don't think anything is going to go backwards. I think we're going to still see radical change in how consumers are living their lives. A mixture of physical and digital will always, I think, be where people want to be. The rise of the metaverse and the online virtual experience is only going to grow over time. Virtual currency, as you said, Manny, will also start to grow and become the norm, I think. However, I think ultimately, to mirror a point that Eling said, companies, when they think about transformation, always will have to focus on understanding their customers, being customer centric, really getting under the skin of what their customers are doing, what their customers want, what their customers dream about. And I think that's focus on understanding the customer will always be at the core. The world will change and continue to accelerate in how companies need to move with their customers. So I think that's what they're going to have to all focus on as they go forward. And I think we're just going to see more and more innovation. Still, though, with an ultimate focus on cracking some of those basics of transformation, some of the basics around the use of data, the use of technology, a clear strategy, senior support. All of those foundation stones will be needed, but we'll need those then to make sure that we can keep up with the ever-changing consumer and the world that they live in.
Terrific. Eling, your fearless forecast.
So before that, I just wanted to share this thing, right? Because that's a question that I ponder upon a lot as well, especially around the future of work. I was reading this article about the rise of investments in Africa, and one of the South African startups, a fintech startup called Yoko. So they provide merchants with portable card machines, and this news basically said that what would have taken them, 5 years, 10 years to get all these small merchants. So in South Africa, there are 6 million small merchants, right? Getting all of them on board, it would have taken them 5-10 years, but they managed to do this in less than 2 months. And now that South Africa is again opening up again, they actually see more and more people coming back to the stores to make payments instead of doing it at home. However, they are making those payments using credit cards instead of cash. So there is already that conversion, right? So while they've reverted back to in person, the form is that they are going cashless, and that's here to stay. For me, though, if I really were to think as to what I think it's going to stay and we're going to see more innovation in, I think what this pandemic has really shown us is the inequality in access, right? Access to education, to healthcare, to financing, and to jobs. And I think that's something that's going to continue changing. Well, I hope it does, and I hope people do realize that more innovation is needed in that space. But I think that that's something that people have started realizing, and I don't think that's going to go away. Yeah. You're on mute.
Thank you. And last but not least, Xavier.
Yeah, thanks again, Manny. So want to echo what Nick and Eling mentioned, right? I think most of these behaviors and changes are here to stay. So when you look at what is truly driving digital transformation, right, it is the broader changes and disruptions that have already been happening in the marketplace, even prior to COVID, right? So these changes are things like, number one, a shift in customers' demographics and expectations, right? I mean, they're younger, they're digital natives. For example, when my 4-year-old daughter goes to like our big flat screen TV, her immediate reaction is to swipe left for more shows, right? Or how our family now spends time together, having popcorn and watching movies on Netflix, right? So people are already used to convenience and on-demand services, right? So it's hard to change these higher level expectations, right? So that will continue. Another thing is, you have this influx of technology in every aspect of our lives. A few years ago, conversations were primarily about e-commerce and fintech. Now you have prop tech, reg tech, sustainability tech, like all kinds of tech, right? And you have blockchain, AI permeating all kinds of businesses, careers, functions, right? So what enterprises historically just let their IT team handle for them previously, right, should now become part of their core business and core strategy, right, which they themselves have to do. And I think third is this shift in the competitive landscape, right? So meaning anyone and everyone, regionally, globally, locally, can be your potential competitor. And organizations have to leverage on various digital models in order to address these changing revenue pools, right? So all these and more are actually changing the rules of the game both today and in the future, right? So the challenge for businesses is transforming both their products and business models, as well as, probably more importantly, their organization and culture. So just want to echo that again.
Great. Well, it looks like we've run out of time. So I want to thank you, Elaine, Nick, and Xavier. I thought this was a terrific conversation. Some of the things I picked up today, fundamentally, this is about people transformation. Another thing I picked up, make sure it's about customers, right? Customers remain the core of our universe. Third, you can't really be successful unless you get the support of your CEO or your board. To get started, start with a roadmap that has near-term wins. Pitfall is doing everything under the sun. So avoid trying to do everything under the sun. And then finally, be mindful of, I think as a global community, of this issue of equal access to digital services. And with that, I thank all of you and hope to see you in person soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much again, Nick, Eling, Xavier, and of course, Manny. We are honored to hear your insightful takeaways.